May 28, 1944, 14,000 feet over the Ardennes forest, France. The moment his cockpit shook, Oberleutnant Erich Voss thought it was turbulence. The sun was high, the sky was clean, and their 12 Messerschmitt Bf-109s were arrowhead-tight in echelon right, slicing westward over the pines below. They were returning from a fruitless patrol. No enemy bombers, no action, and no kill markings for anyone. Just another empty flight that wasted fuel and risked running into Thunderbolts or Mustangs they couldn't outrun anymore. But when the second shudder hit, more violent, and followed by a distant popping sound, Erich's eyes flicked up, expecting flak bursts or perhaps radio-static interference from the ground. Then came the metallic clink against his canopy, like hail. Except it wasn't hail. It was a shell casing, still spinning. He looked right. Oscar was gone. Where his wingman should have been, there was only a spiraling trail of smoke and shredded parts, as if a giant had reached down and swatted the plane like a toy. Then the thunder roared in from above, close, fast, impossibly close. Not from in front. From behind and above. Instinct screamed. He slammed his stick left, diving the 109 into a hard bank, snapping into a near-stall turn as tracer rounds hissed past his left wing. Too late. The blue blur sliced down from the heavens like a falling sword. Silver fuselage, bubble canopy, black and white checkerboard nose, the unmistakable silhouette of a P-51 Mustang, too fast, too silent, too damn perfect. In the seconds it took for Erich to roll and dive, 2 more German fighters were gone. One exploded mid-roll, the canopy launching skyward like a champagne cork. The other vanished beneath the forest canopy in a smear of flame and pine needles. There hadn't been any radio chatter, no warning. Just 14 seconds. From peace to annihilation. He cursed, heart pounding, fingers clenching the stick. The Mustang had hit them like a hawk breaking a formation of pigeons. 1 second the Luftwaffe formation had been clean and disciplined. The next it was falling apart under an ambush that shouldn't have been possible. Because they were at cruising altitude, they had air superiority here at least. And yet, the Americans had dropped in from above. Voss caught a flash in his rearview mirror, another P-51 rolling inverted behind him. Flaps popped open, the silhouette almost elegant, almost dancing in the air. The Americans were diving like they had no fear of energy loss, no fear of blackout, no fear of being caught on the climb. Because they didn't need to climb again, they were already winning. Below Erich, the forest became a green smear. He pulled hard left, praying the Mustang overshot. It didn't. The first burst missed, the second clipped his tail. The third hit his engine. Flames burst from the cowling. Warning lights flared red across the instrument panel. He screamed in rage, at the war, at Goering, at the promises of air superiority, at the broken factories that couldn't deliver new engines, at the arrogance of assuming American planes were slow, heavy, stupid. And at himself, for believing that the Mustangs needed hours to find them. They'd needed 14 seconds. 10 minutes earlier, high above them in the frozen stillness of 27,000 feet, Captain Thomas Ridgely squinted through the canopy of his Mustang. He and Red Flight had been gliding for 22 miles on near-zero throttle, oxygen masks tight, barely a whisper from their Merlin engines. They had sun behind them, altitude advantage, and the reports of a Luftwaffe patrol returning from Belgium, flying lazy and relaxed, unaware. He counted them. 12 line abreast, arrowhead formation, he said into the mic. Copy that, replied Hutch, his wingman. Orders. Ridge smiled behind his mask. Drop into 'em. No orders to protect bombers this time. No escort duty. This was search and destroy, and the destroy part was coming fast. He pushed the throttle. The Merlin screamed to life with a deep, satisfying roar. Below, the Germans were silhouetted perfectly against the trees. His gun sight settled on the lead fighter. 14 seconds later, they were in the middle of the formation, not behind it, inside it. And Ridge wasn't the only one. The air was filled with screams, smoke, cannon fire, and spinning debris. The Mustang pilots knew what this meant. The new tactics worked. No long dogfights, no chasing, no energy bleed, drop from above, fire once and vanish back into the sky. That was how Ridge had learned it in Italy, and how they'd refined it now in the skies over France. Erich Voss's formation never had a chance. And for the first time in his life, the German ace realized something horrifying. They weren't the hunters anymore. They were prey. The stick trembled violently in Erich Voss's grip as the nose of his Bf-109 pointed down at a near-vertical angle, smoke belching from the engine compartment in bursts. Fire licked along the cowling seams, hungry and bright, as if devouring the promises he'd once believed in, that German pilots were the apex predators of the sky. He slammed a gloved fist against the canopy release lever. Stuck. Another slam. This time it hissed open a half-inch. The smoke thickened in the cockpit. Burning oil, wiring, and the sharp stink of ozone filled his lungs. He coughed violently, ripped the mask from his face, and shouted as his skin singed against the molten metal of the seatbelt buckle. The altimeter spun, 9,000 feet and falling fast. He braced his boots against the seat rim, shoulders wedged, and kicked upward. The canopy blew back with a screech and caught in the slipstream, snapping free. Air slammed into him like a fist. His headset ripped away. The world became wind, heat, and a dozen rivulets of sweat pouring down his back. Bail out, Voss, now. But somewhere inside, he hesitated. Because he wasn't just a pilot. He was a Gruppenkommandeur, leader of the 7th Staffel, 41 confirmed kills, a Ritterkreuz around his neck, and a squadron of boys who still looked at him like he had answers. He turned his head and saw none of them. The air was full of black smoke trails and falling wreckage. Another 109 spun past upside down, tail sheared off, pilot slumped forward. 2 parachutes. Only 2. His hand hovered over the release harness. A Mustang streaked by in the distance, low and fast, wings wagging once, taunting. The rage finally broke through. He cursed aloud, undid the harness, stood on the seat, and jumped. The parachute cracked open like a thunderclap. For a moment there was peace. Just silence and the vast mosaic of the Ardennes below, forests, fields, villages. Then through the ringing in his ears, the whine of engines returned. He looked up. 3 Mustangs were arcing around again. They weren't climbing. They didn't need to. They were already leveling out to re-engage the remnants of his formation. They weren't fighting a battle. They were cleaning up. At 17,000 feet, Captain Ridgely banked left and scanned the trail of destruction. 6 Messerschmitts confirmed down, maybe 7. Their formation had shattered like glass. He pulled alongside Hutch, who wore his usual cocky grin inside the canopy. "That's gotta be a record," Hutch said, voice crackling through the radio. 12 seconds, 6 kills. 14, Ridge corrected, checking his clock. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." "Yeah, but hell, Ridge, they never saw us. It was like swatting blind gulls." That made Ridge pause. He looked down, squinting at a drifting black speck. A parachute. Someone had made it out. Probably their lead, Voss maybe, or whoever had been barking orders into that disciplined German wedge. "Let him go," Ridge said quietly. "He's already lost everything." Hutch exhaled. "Didn't think you were going soft." "I'm not," Ridge said, pushing throttle gently forward. I just know he's going to land and realize the war changed while he was still in the air. They regrouped north, near the cloud cover over the Meuse, watching their fuel gauges, no longer worried about being intercepted, not since the Mustangs' arrival. 3 years ago, every patrol west of the Rhine meant flirting with death. The Luftwaffe had ruled the sky in tight, lethal formations. Now, they were ghosts, appearing in ones and twos, cannibalized for parts, sent out with fresh-faced replacements in outgunned aircraft. But still, Voss's unit had been tight. Disciplined. That wasn't a rookie formation. Command will want to know about this one, Ridge said. This was no milk run. He glanced over at Red 3, Lieutenant Ortega, his newest pilot. The kid had come up from Sicily, full of fire but still green in the eyes. You good, 3? I'm good, Ortega said. I think I scratched one but couldn't confirm. Doesn't matter, you were in the pocket, you were fast and clean. I almost lost my turn in angle. You didn't, and that saved Hutch's tail. Ortega went quiet. Hutch grinned. I'd buy you a drink if I thought you could grow facial hair, 3. Ortega laughed, relief loosening in his voice. You just don't want to admit I had the better roll rate. You fly like you're double-jointed. I fly like a Mustang was meant to fly. Boys, Ridge cut in, less chatter, more altitude, we're not done. Erich Voss hit the ground hard, rolling through damp grass and landing in a low ditch that stank of cow manure and wet leaves. He ripped off the chute, staggered upright, and watched what was left of his staffel burn in the distance. Trails of black smoke rising like funeral torches into the clear spring sky. He stood there for a long time. No more radio, no ground crew, no fuel trucks waiting with hot canisters, no staffel to return to. Just him. And the knowledge that the American fighters had dropped from 25,000 feet and punched through his best pilots in 14 seconds. That night, as he stumbled into a rural village barn, greeted by silent eyes and weary nods from civilians who had learned not to ask questions, Voss sat in the straw and pulled off one boot. The leather was scorched, the sole was half melted from the cockpit heat, his sock stuck to his skin. He stared at the boot a long time, then at his shaking hands. He could still hear the Merlin engine behind him, still see the tracers, the flash of light as Oscar's plane disintegrated, the silence when the Americans had vanished again, up into the sun, like ghosts returning to heaven. They didn't linger. They didn't need to. They weren't flying for kills. They were flying for dominance. And they had it. In England, at a debrief tent outside RAF Botsford, Ridge and his squadron leaned over a map pinned with red tacks and rough black arrows. Brigadier Halloway tapped one of them with a pipe. These were 109 GS, confirmed by the gun camera footage, he said. What surprises me is how tightly they were flying. No dispersion, no weavers. It's like they didn't even expect to be bounced. They didn't, Ridge said. And your strike angle? 35 degrees. Silent drop from 27,000 feet. Speed edge of compressibility. No chatter, no warning. How long in the cone? 14 seconds from first visual to first hit. The brigadier nodded grimly. That means the Luftwaffe's doctrine is still stuck in 41. They think we're escorting bombers. They're not wrong, Ridge said, but we're escorting from the stratosphere. Halloway grinned, poetic. No, sir, it's mathematics. The room was silent for a moment. Then the brigadier said, Good work, Captain. We'll get this into Bomber Command's analysis pool. Dismissed. Outside, the air smelled of hot coffee, fuel, and spring rain. Ridge looked up at the overcast skies, forming again over England. Somewhere out there, German fighters were still taking off, still following orders, still thinking they had a chance. But that window was closing. Back in France, Voss finally reached what was left of a forward command shack outside Liege. He was muddy, limping, face soot-smeared. The sentry stared but let him through. Inside, a captain looked up from a radio table. "Maine got Voss," he whispered. "They said your entire squadron." "They're gone," Erich said hoarsely. "All of them in 14 seconds." He sat down, silent. The captain opened a canteen and handed it to him. "What happened?" Voss drank, then stared. "The Americans, they own the sky, and they don't even need to fight anymore." June 1, 1944, Berlin, Luftwaffe High Command. The marble floors of the Oberkommando headquarters echoed like a cathedral. Erich Voss's boots, still scuffed and blackened from the crash, left faint marks on the polished surface as he walked under the domed ceiling, past portraits of aces, dead heroes, and iron eagles with outstretched wings. He passed a row of secretaries who didn't look up. 2 guards in coal scuttle helmets flanked the double oak doors ahead, one rapped twice. "Major Voss," the guard barked, "for interrogation." The doors groaned open. Inside sat Generaloberst Keller of Luftflotte 3, a man whose collar was worth more than a staffel's monthly rations. His gloves were folded neatly beside a thick folder stamped VERTRAULICH. Beside him stood a younger officer, thin, surgical eyes, carrying a clipboard like a scalpel. Voss didn't salute, just stood, helmet under one arm. "I lost 9 men, he said flatly. The general didn't blink. "We read the report, 6 dead, 3 missing." "They're dead." "What happened to your formation, Major?" Voss inhaled sharply, then exhaled like someone lighting a cigarette with a dying match. 14 seconds, that's all it took." "Explain." "They dropped into us from above. 3, maybe 4 Mustangs. Silent, perfect angles, no warning, no time, no climb. They were gone before our boys even completed a turn." Keller exchanged glances with the aide. "And you believe this is common now?" "It wasn't a fluke, it was a system. The Americans are using their altitude advantage like a hammer. They aren't dogfighting, they're sniping." The younger officer finally spoke. "The Oberkommando believes the Mustangs' range is exaggerated in Allied propaganda. Intelligence states they're still relying on forward fuel dumps." Voss laughed, bitter and sharp. "You don't understand," he said. "They're not using range to reach us. They're using it to outthink us." That same day, RAF Botsford Airfield, England. Captain Ridgely unwrapped a stick of juicy fruit as the heavy doors of the strategy tent closed behind him. The air inside was thick with chalk dust and aviation sweat. A towering flight operations map dominated the back wall. Colored yarn traced out a lattice of bombing corridors, fighter patrol routes, and fuel windows. Colonel Danvers pointed at a new red arc that pierced deep into occupied France. "This one's different," he said. "Berlin's playing hardball. They're concentrating flak belts around the southern approach. Bomber Command wants a wedge from the west." "How deep?" Ridge asked. "Metz, Saarbrücken, then sweep into the Rhine." Ridge raised an eyebrow. "That's past the edge of the Mustang's safe return." Danvers didn't blink. "You'll carry drop tanks. And if they burst during combat, then don't get hit." A low chuckle moved through the tent. Danvers leaned in. "Your job, Ridge, is to get them there. The fortresses will handle the rest. And if you meet resistance—" "I won't wait 14 seconds, Ridge said. "Good, dismissed." June 2, 1944, above the French-German border, 23,000 feet. The sun cut jagged shadows over the clouds as 6 silver shapes glided in tight V formation, contrails fanning out behind them like comet tails. Red Flight rode ahead of the bomber wave now, way ahead, invisible to the ground, silent on the radio. They were ghosts in the blue. Behind them, a cathedral of war moved through the sky. 83 B-17 flying fortresses, droning like a hive, each bristling with .50 caliber guns and carrying over 4,000 pounds of high explosive. But none of that mattered if the Luftwaffe caught them unguarded. Captain Ridge leaned into his stick and tapped the fuel gauge on the belly tank, still half full, enough for a turn and burn, maybe two. "Stay cold," he radioed. "Eyes forward, bandits could be anywhere." They didn't see the Germans until they were on them. 12 Focke-Wulf FW-190s, slightly older, heavy on the turn, vicious in a dive, rose in a tight cluster from the valleys below. Ridge's eyes narrowed. "Contact, low 6 o'clock, 2,000 feet under the bomber line. Looks like they're climbing to hit the fortresses from below." He flipped open the arming switch. "They haven't seen us, yet." Hutch's voice was calm. "Then we drop in." "We drop in." Back in Berlin, 3 hours earlier. Voss had taken a train east from Berlin to an obscure airfield outside Frankfurt. His orders were not to fly, but to observe. There on the runway sat a new prototype, the Focke-Wulf Ta-152H long-winged, sleek, turbocharged to chase the high-flying Americans where no German piston engine had reliably gone before. But it wasn't ready, not in numbers, not in production, not when they needed it yesterday. The engineer whispered to Voss, "She can catch a Mustang above 30,000 feet. Can she survive the turn?" The man said nothing. Later, over weak coffee and a plate of powdered eggs, Voss stared at the telegram in his hand. The ink was smudged from sweat. "New American push expected. Reconnaissance confirms P-51 deep penetrations near Saarbrücken. Intercept and destroy." He crushed the note in his fist. "We can't fight them up there," he muttered. "Not yet." Back in the sky, Ridge's Mustang in a 45-degree dive. The world blurred. He pulled the stick gently, easing the Mustang into a ballistic arc, throttle wide open, flaps up, everything vibrating. The FW-190s never saw them coming. Ortega fired first. His tracers stitched a spiral along a climbing fighter's fuselage. The Focke-Wulf banked hard, too hard, and its wings sheared off mid-turn. One down. Ridge lined up his shot. A 190 was nearly at the belly of a B-17, closing in. Not today. He squeezed the trigger. The 6.50 cals rattled with the sound of fury. The round struck across the spine of the enemy fighter, bursting it into fire and tumbling aluminum. The American bombers droned on, untouched. 14 seconds again. 4 German fighters had vanished. Below in the town of Thionville, a boy of 12 looked up from a bombed-out schoolyard and counted the contrails. He saw silver specks diving into the black dots. He saw explosions blossom like steel flowers. He saw falling things. His mother ran out, screaming his name. He pointed skyward. "The sky," he whispered, "the sky is fighting." By the time Ridge rejoined the formation, the Germans were retreating, those who could. 4 Mustangs had taken light damage. 1, Red 4, had been lost, caught in a crossfire from 2 190s near the end. But the bombers, not a scratch. The Americans had learned. They no longer played by the Luftwaffe's rules. At sunset, French Field HQ near Metz. Voss read the report. 15 FW-190s engaged, 5 confirmed losses, 2 probables, 1 Mustang shot down. He threw the paper into the stove. His aide looked uneasy. "The High Command wants you in Paris tomorrow. They say Goering himself may attend." "Then let him come. They want your thoughts on new defensive tactics." Voss stood slowly. "Here's my tactic. Stop lying to ourselves. The war in the air is already lost. The Americans aren't fighting us." He looked out the window. They're erasing us. June 3, 1944, airfield near Paris. Erich Voss stood before the wreckage of what once passed for a fighter squadron. 7 FW-190s lined the cracked tarmac, paint peeling. One with a dented engine cowling patched with sheet metal. Another had a tail fin from a different aircraft entirely, olive drab beneath chipped gray. The mechanic called it the Frankenwolf. A gust of wind blew across the field, carrying the smell of scorched oil, hay, and something else, wet leather and tobacco, the scent of uniforms that had seen better days. A line of boys stood before him, helmets under their arms, barely out of school. One wore his brother's flight jacket, another hadn't even shaved yet. Voss clenched his jaw. "Is this what we send to meet Mustangs now?" he said, not to anyone in particular. His aide, Lieutenant Scheffer, stepped beside him. "Berlin calls it Jagdverband E Emergency Fighter Detachment. You're in command." "I see. The idea is you use speed and surprise to make one hard strike, then break contact. 14 seconds, maybe." Scheffer looked down. Voss turned back to the pilots. "You're not aces. You're barely trained. But you're going to climb to 20,000 feet, dive like hell, and hope the Americans didn't see you first. That's not courage. That's obedience." One boy raised a hand. "Sir, what if they're waiting?" Voss stared at him. "They always are." June 4, 1944, RAF Botsford. Ridge unwrapped a paper envelope. Aerial reconnaissance photos from a high-altitude Spitfire run. The black and white prints were still damp with developer. The target, a rail yard outside Reims, France. A concentration of boxcars and fuel drums, under camouflage nets, with flak towers rising like crooked teeth. But what caught Ridge's eye was the formation on the perimeter, fighters. Not tucked in revetments, not sheltered in forest clearings, but parked openly as if inviting attack. He tapped one photo and passed it to Hutch. "Too perfect," Ridge said. "They want us to see this." Hutch nodded. "It's bait." "And guess who's flying into it?" "You volunteering." "I'm always volunteering." That night, as Ridge cleaned his .45 in the corner of the officer's tent, Ortega approached with a mug of black coffee and a question burning behind his eyes. "You ever miss?" Ortega asked. Ridge didn't look up. "Everyone misses." "No, I mean, do you ever let one go, like that shoot you saw last time?" Ridge paused, barrel halfway reassembled. "I let him go," he said, "because dead men don't talk, but the ones who live, they spread fear." Ortega sat down quiet. "Sometimes," Ridge said, "fear is the best weapon we have." June 5, 1944, morning skies over France, 25,000 feet. Red flight flew low sun, 4 Mustangs slicing through dawn haze. Their long-range tanks shimmered like mirrors, nearly dry. Ridge flew lead. Hutch right, Ortega left. Red 4, new kid, Daniels, lagged half a click behind, still learning how to read his plane instead of forcing it. Below them, B-24 Liberators droned across the English Channel like migrating geese. The strike package was heavy, 124 bombers heading for Reims. Ridge keyed his mic. "All birds report status. Red 2 green. Red 3 green. Red 4 tight but holding. Good, we're heading into a painted ambush. Stay at Angels 25 until I say otherwise. Then we dive like the hammer of God." Ortega's voice cracked. "Roger that." South of Reims, German radar post 0942. A young Luftwaffe technician stared at his scope. "Signal echo, fast, high, probably Mustangs." The officer on duty nodded. "We expected that. Have the fighters climb to intercept, minimum throttle. Let them think we're not watching." Outside in camouflage trenches, a row of 88 flak guns turned slowly skyward. In a nearby barn, Voss crouched beside a half-buried radio set, watching fuel lines pump into the FW-190s outside. He didn't like it. Too clean, too staged, too coordinated. Sheffer approached, clipboard in hand. "Command wants you airborne in 3 minutes." Voss nodded, eyes scanning the tree line. He could almost feel it. "They're already here." 0948 above Reims. Break, incoming 10 o'clock low." Hutch's voice split the air like a whip. Ridge slammed his stick left. 2 FW-190s rose in unison, climbing steeply, guns spitting tracers. Red 4 took a hit in the right wing, stabilizer gone, engine coughing. But the Mustangs didn't scatter. They turned. Ridge dove past the first attacker, flipped his plane inverted, and rolled into a downward spiral to match the 190's vector. He lined up the shot mid-dive, fired. The German fighter exploded in a blossom of white and orange. Behind him, Hutch pursued the other, chewing up its tail until the plane lost control and cartwheeled into a thicket. "2 down," Ridge called. "There's more, stay high." Below, at the German forward base, Voss heard the rattle of gunfire and the rumble of distant engines. The trap was sprung. But it wasn't going the way command expected. He saw 2 Mustangs flash overhead in a shallow dive, peeling off before the flak guns even fired. The ambush had failed. Again. "Get them in the air," he barked. A sergeant shouted orders. Engines sputtered to life. Voss pulled on his helmet and ran toward his patched-up FW-190. He knew this would be suicide. But he also knew the younger pilots behind him had no chance unless he flew first. 10-01 mid-air chaos. Ridge rolled right to evade a burst of flak that lit the clouds in front of him like fireworks. Smoke coiled from Daniel's Mustang, trailing oil, damaged but flying. Red 4, peel off. Return base, don't be a hero. "I can." "Go." Daniels banked west alone. That left 3. And more Germans were coming. 5 FW-190s broke cloud cover above, led by one with a black nose cone and scarred wings, Voss. Ridge recognized the movement, tight discipline, no wasted energy. This one wasn't a rookie. "Lead's mine," he said. They met head-on at 16,000 feet. Ridge fired first too soon. Voss jinked left, rolling beneath him in a corkscrew. The Mustang overshot. But Ridge didn't panic. He pulled a high yo-yo turn, using his speed advantage to regain altitude, then cut throttle and dove again. Voss spun into a vertical climb, then suddenly dropped flaps and flipped his plane like a thrown dagger. The 2 aircraft passed within 50 feet. Time slowed. Their eyes met. Neither blinked. Ridge banked hard, pulled into a lag pursuit. Voss looped low, trying to bleed off speed. Ridge followed. But the Mustang wasn't built to turn fight a 190. It was built to strike and escape. So Ridge changed tactics. He broke off, climbed. Voss instinctively followed. And that's when Ridge flipped, dropped throttle and caught the perfect angle. He fired. 4.50 cal rounds punched into Voss's fuselage, sparks, smoke, and a flash of fire. The German's aircraft shook but held. He didn't bail out. He kept climbing. Ridge let him go. Later, Ridge's Mustang cruising home. Ortega limped alongside him, one wing scratched, one fuel tank leaking. They de-lost Daniels, but the bombers made it. The trap had failed. "I think that was the guy you spared last week," Ortega said. Ridge didn't answer right away. "He's better now." "Yeah, but not better enough." Ridge nodded. "I think he's learning something no one in Berlin wants to admit." Back at the German base, Voss landed hard. Smoke poured from his engine. Ground crew ran to meet him. He climbed down, limped to the nearest bench and sat. Schäfer ran over, eyes wide. You survived. For now. You saw them. Yes. And Voss lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. They're getting better. He exhaled. And we're getting fewer.